In our last video, we talked about God's promise to Ahab that he was going to wipe out his house and everybody in his house and associated with him. You can see Ahab at the top of the peak there on the top part of the timeline. He's at the top part of that peak because he was really bad, like the worst. And so that's worth noticing. And then we talked about his son Ahaziah. He died. Joram took his place, Jehu, and Jehu's bloody purge cleaned out that whole mess. So we're going to pick up where we left off. And today, what I would like to do is talk about most of Jehu's legacy. So we're going to follow Jehu, his son Jehoahaz, his son Joash, and his son Jeroboam II. That's really where I want to camp. I want to talk about Jeroboam II for just a few minutes. So let's open up our Bibles, and I'm gonna just go ahead. Let's do 2 Kings 10:35. I'm not gonna do anything with that. 2 Kings 10:35. This is not the full treatment. Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Jehoahaz his son reigned in his place. I'm not going to mark Jehoahaz there because it's just the mention. There's no information there other than that he is Jehu's son. So let's go to chapter 13, and this is where we're going to start marking about Jehu's lineage. Chapter 13 and verse 1. In the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. I'm not going to talk about him, but we need to go ahead and take care of him in our timeline here. So he's going to get a red highlight because he's a king in Israel. And Jehoahaz is going to be number 12. King number 12. Let's jump down to verse 10. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. So we've got another king that we need to mark here. And so I'm going to mark him. He's going to get a red highlight. He's going to be number 13. And it's this is one thing that I like to do in the margin of my Bible. It's not like it's rocket science to try and figure this stuff out, but I like to have this information. Jehoash is also referred to as Joash, so I'm just going to write that. Also Joash. And it's not so nice in my electronic Bible where I have to click on that little tag there to see my note, like that, and the note's over here. But whenever I'm looking down on the page of my Bible and I have a wide margin, I can see it. It's a little bit useful. Look at the bottom of that paragraph. Excuse me, verse 13. So Joash, look at that, in the exact same paragraph, he's referred to as Jehoash and Joash. That's one of the things that I like to know about that. Verse 13. So Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat on his throne. So here is the next king of Israel. I'm only going to do this. I'm going to give Jeroboam a red highlight, but I'm not going to write anything about him because this is not a big deal. Like it's just, okay, Joash died, his son Jeroboam becomes king. But Jeroboam is a really big deal, and so I'm not going to give him the full treatment, but I at least want to be able to look down at my page and say, okay, this is where Jeroboam starts. And the exact same thing is true when you go down to verse 16, chapter 14, and verse 16, it says the same thing. We're just going to come back to the story. Jehoash slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son reigned in his place. It's the exact same thing that we read just a second ago. I just want to see Jeroboam. But this is the substance of Jeroboam, and this is what we're going to be doing in our time today. Chapter 14, starting in verse 23. Let's just start by marking. In the 15th year of Amaziah the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam the son of Joash, king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria. So this is where we're going to read about Jeroboam's actual story, the text that talks about him. So this is where he's going to get full treatment from me. So 2 Kings 14:23, Jeroboam gets a red highlight. He is going to be king number 14. Excuse me. Jeroboam is king number 14. So there's a couple things that I want to talk about with Jeroboam. First of all, let me go back to my timeline. Jeroboam is at the third pinnacle, peak on this timeline roller coaster. If you look all the way to the left, Jeroboam is the first. He's at the top of the timeline because he was the first king of Israel. And also, he's the one who introduced the golden calves and Dan and Bethel and all of that. So it's kind of it's not a high point morally for sure, but it's a high point in Israel's history. And so he's at the top. And then we have the first valley where there's all of this killing each other and striving for power. And that's just kind of a rough time in Israel's history. There's civil war during that time, so that gets treated like a valley. And then we go back up to the second peak. That's Ahab. Ahab is the worst king of Israel, so he gets listed at the top. We go down to the second valley. That's Jehu. You remember Jehu's bloody purge. That was a really rough time for Israel. And I would like for you to stop here and think about this. That valley, that's a rough time. Jehu's going around. He's killing people in the north. He's killing people in the south. 70 sons of Ahab, everybody in Ahab's house. Remember, he calls all the worshipers and priests of Baal together, and he wipes out Baal from Israel, which is all really good morally, but that'll rock the boat just a little bit. That's going to create a tumultuous time for Israel. And so as you move back up, Jehu, Jehoahaz, Joash to Jeroboam, what I would like for you to do is just feel the tension in Israel and how hard things are and how rough things are. So when we get to Jeroboam, the reason why he is at the third peak is because this is the economic golden age of Israel. Jeroboam and Israel are just doing great right now. Jeroboam II is like the Solomon of the north. This is the time when the borders are expanding and the borders are secure and the money is flowing and everything is great. And so that's the reason why Jeroboam's at the top. I would like to just show you, let me go back to my Bible here, and I'll show you 3 indicators of this. You don't really have a lot in the text to point you to just how good things are going for Israel right now. But look at the end of verse 23. Jeroboam began to reign in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. Sometimes in my Bible, I just take a pencil like that, and I just underline it. With all of the murder and all of the conspiracy and all of the tension up to this point in Israel, for one king to sit on the throne for 41 years is a super big deal. And so that ought to alert us that this is a time of relative peace, at least for the north. Look at verse 25. I guess let's read 24 because I don't want you to think he's a good guy. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin. 25. He restored the border of Israel from Lebo Hamath as far as the sea of Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel. So here's my pencil underline. He restored the border of Israel. That might not sound like a big deal to you, but let me see if I can do this. I'm going to pull up a map. This map is going to be a little bit difficult to appreciate. This is the different stages of growth of the Assyrian Empire. Israel is getting ready to have to deal with Assyria. And so you can see from the key over here, orange at the very top. This is Nineveh. This is where Assyria starts. And then they grow into the green space. And then they grow into the purple space. And it's just this expansion of an empire over hundreds of years. During the time of Jeroboam, I'm going to move over here to the Promised Land. During the time of Jeroboam, there's the Sea of Galilee. That's Israel. The brown is what's happening during Jeroboam's time. I guess right before Jeroboam's time. The red is what's happening during Jeroboam's time. And the green is what's happening after Jeroboam's time. And so what you see here is Assyria is just zeroing in on Palestine. But this map is not entirely true to our situation right now, because it's not like somebody just snaps their fingers and says, here's the new border Assyria grew. There's battling and fighting and all kinds of tension and years worth of dispute over borders and stuff like this. And so during this time, Jeroboam is fighting back. And even though Assyria ultimately lands in this territory, the Bible tells us that Jeroboam held on to Damascus all the way up to Hamath. And Assyria in the north is really struggling economically and politically right now. And Israel is flourishing economically and politically right now. And so I just want you to appreciate that about Jeroboam. He reigned 41 years. There's relative peace. In verse 25, he restored the border of Israel. You might jump down to verse 28 to see the rest. The rest of the acts of Jeroboam and all that he did, and his might, how he fought, how he restored Damascus and Hamath to Judah and Israel, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? So Jeroboam is really powerful and doing good things for Israel. That's important for the reasons that we're about to start looking at right now. Let's talk about 3 prophets. Incidentally, let me go back to our timeline. I'm done talking about the kings right now. You've got Jehu's legacy. Jehu, Jehoahaz, Joash, Jeroboam II. And we know why Jeroboam II is at the peak of that timeline. Okay, 3 prophets. Number 1. Let's start in verse 25. He restored the border of Israel from Lebo Hamath as far as the sea of Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was from Gath-hepher. For the Lord saw that the affliction of Israel was very bitter, for there was none left, bond or free, and there was none to help Israel. But the Lord had not said that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, so he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam the son of Joash. Yes, it is that Jonah that we're talking about here. So let's do a couple of things first before we make the point. I want to see this for sure in verse 25 It says, Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet. I'm going to take Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, and I'm going to give him a bright orange highlight, because orange is the brightest color that I have in my highlighting arsenal. It means sections. And so even though this isn't technically like a paragraph or a section, this is the Jonah section. This is where I'm going to find the prophet in the text here. And so I definitely want to see that Jonah is not only famous because he's going to Nineveh and preaching this message to the Assyrians, he's also working in Israel and talking to Jeroboam II, during this time. So here's one thing that I'm also going to do. I'm going to go to Jonah, the book of Jonah, and in the margin at the very top of the book, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai. I'm just going to take that. I'm not going to highlight this because it's the book of Jonah. I know that it's Jonah. But in order to make a note in the margin of my Bible, I've got to highlight this and attach a note to this. So don't highlight anything, but right next to it, here's my note. Let me take the highlight off. In the book of Jonah, I'm going to say Jonah. See 2 Kings 14:25. And I'm going to write just a little note here. Jonah worked with Jeroboam II. And so now whenever I come to the book of Jonah, I have some sense of context to say this is where I go back in the history of Israel to find this guy and to find what he was doing. And I think that it's really important to do that. Let's go to 2 Kings 14:25 so we can get back to our Jeroboam II and Jonah. It's really important to do that because think about this. This is one of the lessons. I said we're not going to do a whole lot of lessons in this, but this is a lesson with Jonah. As rotten as Jonah was, because he refused to share the message of God's mercy and salvation with people that he did not think deserved it, as rotten as he was, I think it's even worse than that. And this passage tells us that. Look at verse 26 again. For the Lord saw that the affliction of Israel was very bitter. There was none left, bond or free, and there was none to help Israel. And so God sends Jonah to Jeroboam II in Israel to give him this message to say, hey man, go and fight and restore the borders of Israel. And this is going to be a time of economic and political prosperity for our people, even though we don't deserve it. I mean, we're in the northern kingdom of Israel, and you know good and well that these are not God-fearing, God-serving people, but they're Jonah's people. And so he's willing to offer a message of hope and mercy and salvation and God's love and God's patience to his own people who don't deserve it, but he's not willing to offer that message of mercy and hope and salvation to people that he doesn't like. And so that, I think, is even worse. So just one thing real quick here. Look at verse 26. In my Bible, you might not want to do this. I don't normally like to highlight this much text in one time, but this is the point. This is what Jonah was doing. This is what God was doing in Israel. 26 and 27. The Lord saw that the affliction of Israel was very bitter. There was none left, bond or free. There was none to help Israel, but the Lord had not said that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven. so he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. I'm going to highlight that yellow because that's going to help me appreciate not only Jonah's message and what was happening with Jonah, but I want to go back to the timeline. It is incredible. I think that you can't just read one of these stories and one of these kings to appreciate this. You have to look at the entire history and the entire timeline to say, holy moly, God is so patient and so merciful to not wipe these people off the map. And the fact that we're at Jeroboam II and God is still hanging on is just as much a picture of God's mercy as anything else that you can find in the scripture. And so that's going to be one of the things that I want to see on my page. Excuse me. Let's go to Amos. Amos chapter 1. Amos chapter 1 and verse 1, the words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel. So this is what I do in my Bible. Which he saw concerning Israel. That's a red highlight. When I open up my Bible to Amos and I see the red, this book is concerning Israel, I know who I'm talking to and who I'm talking about. So Amos saw this vision concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. So Amos is written to the northern kingdom of Israel in the days of Jeroboam II, which is what we've been talking about here. There's one other thing. I probably should do this. Concerning Israel in the days of Jeroboam. Next to that, I'm going to write 2 Kings 14:23. That's where I'm going to find the days of Jeroboam that Amos is writing during. Same thing. Let's go to Hosea. Hosea chapter 1 and verse 1. The word of the Lord that came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. Judah is mentioned in this letter, but it's primarily to the northern kingdom of Israel. So, in the days of Jeroboam, I'm going to point myself back to 2 Kings chapter 14 and verse 23. And before I end this video, I'm going to go back to our Jeroboam text, 2 Kings 14:23. In the margin of my Bible, probably the best way to do this is just to attach it to the heading in my electronic Bible. In the margin of my Bible, next to this paragraph. Oh man, I'm having some problems here. There we go. Next to this paragraph, I look down at my Bible and I see Amos and Hosea. I've written Amos and Hosea. Amos and Hosea. And I highlighted them in orange. Make sure if you write Amos and Hosea in the margin of your Bible that you let the ink dry before you run your highlighter over it or blow on it, because if you run your highlighter right over the fresh ink, you're just going to smear it and it's going to make you mad. So write Amos and Hosea, let the ink dry, then highlight it in orange. And so here's what I'm doing. I'm looking down at my Bible and I say, in this paragraph, this is when Jeroboam II is king of Israel. It's red, so I know I'm talking about Israel. And I can see that this is the time when Jonah was a prophet and Amos and Hosea were also prophets during this time. And I've made my corresponding notes in Jonah and Amos and Hosea to point me back to this paragraph so that, when I'm reading the book of Amos, I need to know that this is economic and political prosperity. It's when the people are doing really, really good that they, quote, don't need God anymore. And so God sends these prophets, and this is the last warning that these people are going to get. You all had better figure this out, or it's going to be destruction for you. And the spoiler alert here, they don't figure it out. And in our next video, we're going to talk about that destruction.